Today's video is going to be a little bit different, and it's not just because I'm posting a video after several millennia of not posting anything. This video is much more personal. In my responses, I try taking on ideas and arguments more than attacking the person presenting them. But this time, I can't help but go a little bit more on the personally offensive. Back in 2017, a video popped up called "Bernie Sanders is Unconstitutional." You may recognize this video. I want to be even-handed in my responses, so when someone makes a video as flawed as this one, it shouldn't matter who makes it, it deserves to be refuted by somebody. Even if the somebody doing the refuting is me, and the somebody getting refuted is also me. Yeah, I made the video. That's me. Hi. In it, the main point was that Senator Bernie Sanders posed an unconstitutional religious litmus test on Russell Vought, who was nominated as Deputy Director of the Office of Management and Budget. I also called him an unreasonable postmodernist social justice warrior. In this video, I'd like to beat back a few of those claims, specifically the ignorant claim that Senator Sanders' questioning was unconstitutional. But alongside of that, I made several other points in the video that I'd like to detail why I now disagree with. Just as a warning, you may want to turn down your volume a lot, because this kid gets loud. I mean yelling at a heater loud. Yes, that actually happened. I yelled at my heater in the video and left it in the final take. Really. Once your volume is at near mute level, though still loud enough to hear my definitely less obnoxious voice, I recommend you go back and watch the entire original video first before you watch this one. Once you've done that, you can come back and we'll cringe together. It's gonna be one heck of a video, and I'm not pulling any punches on this one.
Have you ever been at a social gathering, or maybe you're cracking open a cold one with the boys?
Oh jeez, this is gonna be harder than I thought. Kid, I hate to break it to you, but that was not funny. The whole cracking open a cold one with the boys joke, though overused, had humorous usages. This just was not one of them. It's not even a joke, it's just referencing something that's used as a joke.
And you think to yourself, you know what? I wonder. And on the basis of that pondering, you act.
Sorry I keep interrupting myself every sentence. I don't know if it's rude or not because I'm technically just interrupting myself. Note that redundancy. You think to yourself, you know what? I wonder. And on the basis of that pondering, you act. It seems like a lot of emphasis is being put on the thought process leading up to the action that will follow. And that's important because it's key to understanding what this goof is trying to say. We'll come back to that momentarily, so keep it in mind as this kid stumbles down his bullet point list. The one that was on the wall behind him in the video, because he couldn't figure out any other way to make the shot look more interesting.
You decide to make a statement of opinion on a controversial topic, such as politics, religion, sports. And after you make that statement, you hear a low, bassy rumble, like a cave troll's just been let out of its den. You look around to find the source, and you just realize, now there's the 49ers fan in the room.
It's funny because I made that statement, but I know nothing about sports teams or sports in general. I don't know the rules of football, soccer, curling, cricket, surprising, right? Or anything. All I knew was that some time ago there was this whole big thing between a team called the Ravens and a team called the 49ers, and it was all crazy times, and everyone that I knew was a Ravens fan. I probably couldn't even tell you what sport they were playing. Of course, now I know it's baseball, but I didn't know that back then.
And you just realize, now there's the 49ers fan in the room. There's the leftist in the room. Leftist in the room.
Leftist alert! Leftist alert! Ladies and gentlemen, we've got someone who disagrees with us! This whole example analogy thing is very poorly executed. It's not communicated well at all. I've got here the original bullet point script for the video, which reads that the idea behind this was, and I quote, "Have you ever been with others and decided to probe to find out who they are?" Did you notice anything about the pondering at the beginning of the video? The kid never explains what's being pondered, despite all the repetitive emphasis he placed on it. I was trying to say that the reason you stated your controversial opinion was to see who would react with disagreement, or get triggered, or big trigged, as some say. The way I described it in the video made the reaction seem like something that just happened, not something that was anticipated. Yet the whole point of my analogy was that sometimes people make controversial statements to see who disagrees and strike up a conversation. It's a weak analogy to begin with, but I still found a way to make it less effective.
Well, you're not the only one, because Russell Vought just did that. Well, a year ago. But it finally resurfaced to expose the postmodernist, unconstitutional social justice warrior in the room.
In tying that analogy in with the topic of the video, I once again left out the factor of anticipation in the actual scenario. The example is not analogous. The intended analogy doesn't apply. I didn't state whether or not Russell Vought made his statements to find out who would react with disagreement. In fact, he didn't. His words were meant to make clear his stance in response to controversy, not to create controversy. So even if I communicated my intended analogy well, it doesn't apply to the actual situation discussed in the video. In my analogy, the reaction was sought after. In Vought's case, it was not.
But it finally resurfaced to expose the postmodernist, unconstitutional, social justice warrior in the room. And take a wild guess on who it is. It's Bernie Sanders!
Calling Senator Sanders a social justice warrior was really pointless. I just assigned him a cliche and mostly empty label. I didn't state any good reason for labeling him that, and it's tantamount to name-calling. Calling someone an SJW says very little about what they actually believe, and is automatically seen as a pejorative label. I should have used a better, less ridicule-spirited word to describe Senator Sanders' viewpoint. So Senator Sanders, if you're watching this, I apologize. That was unnecessary. I'm sorry. No petition necessary.
Russell Vought was Trump's nominee pick for budget director, and he was being questioned by Bernie Sanders when a post he made from 2016 came up, mentioning Islam.
Quote, Muslims do not simply have a deficient theology. They do not know God because they have rejected Jesus Christ, his son, and they stand condemned.
In the post, he essentially said that Muslims had a deficient theology, didn't know God, and stood condemned.
Wow, it's almost as if you didn't insert a clip of him saying just that seconds before you repeated it near verbatim. He just said that. We all have ears.
Now, Bernie Sanders asked him if he thought that statement was Islamophobic.
Do you believe that that statement is Islamophobic?
Vought said, absolutely not. That's just my faith.
I'm a Christian, and I believe in a Christian set of principles based on my faith.
You've been messing around with videos and stuff for a few years at this point, and yet you still managed to grab the clip with the worst possible audio. I'm sorry, not all of us like to hear audio that's coming through the first telephone ever invented.
This better work, Alex.
Hello, my fellow Americans. You have reached the voicemail box of the House phone of the 3rd House of Senator Bernie Sanders. Did you know that the bottom 90% cannot afford to make this phone call?
Now, Bernie Sanders seemed a little bit ticked at this. He thought it was rude.
I understand you are a Christian.
And after some mildly heated discussion,
You yelled at a heater!
we may begin to further cherry-pick the Constitution. Shut up!
An inanimate object that was just doing its job, keeping you warm. And it's June. Why do we have a heater on in June? Do we have pneumonia? I don't understand why we need that on during the summer.
Shut up!
And now I'm yelling at you. At myself. I'm talking to myself. I need help. Whatever, I don't want to talk about it. You brought this on yourself. You put a heater on in June. You deserve this. Can you believe this kid? Can you believe that I was once this kid? Because I can't. Moreover, I don't want to.
Bernie Sanders voted no, because Vought was not someone who this country was supposed to be about.
This is a crucial moment in the video, because it's the point at which I admit that my main point is wrong. I didn't know it at the time, but the seeds to the destruction of my own argument were within my hands as I stated my case. Bernie Sanders voted no.
Now, what's wrong with this? Well, it's unconstitutional. Article 6 of the US Constitution says there shall be no religious tests for public office. I didn't write that. I didn't say it in my blog. That's the US Constitution.
Bernie Sanders voted no. Is this unconstitutional? Is this a religious litmus test? No, this is a misunderstanding of what a religious litmus test is according to the Constitution. Let's take a look at what the Constitution actually says. No religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. As I was relaying those words in my video, I left out a crucial word: qualification. Being qualified to hold a public office is not the same as receiving sufficient votes to achieve that office. What the Constitution says is that you can't use someone's religious beliefs to establish their qualification for office. When it comes to voting, however, religious beliefs aren't off the table as reasons to vote or not to vote. Senator Sanders hasn't violated Article 6 of the Constitution by basing his vote off of Vought's religious beliefs, because it's just a vote. It doesn't determine Vought's qualification or his eligibility to be nominated in the first place. If Senator Sanders said, nah, this guy shouldn't be allowed to get nominated because he got some janky beliefs, that would be unconstitutional. But that's not what he said. What he said was, it's a no from me, you've got some jank beliefs. With that, the title of my video and the main point of my video fall apart. This is a strange and obvious mistake, but I can assure you it was an honest one. Interestingly enough, the key word that I left out was right there on the screen. I guess I just glossed over it thinking it was that important. Idiot.
Now, the left is treating it like a smackdown, like Bernie Sanders destroyed a religious bigot, caught him right in his tracks, and swept him off his feet. But why are they ignoring the Constitution?
Hang on, run that by me again.
Swept him off his feet.
Swept? That's not a word. There isn't a person in existence who recognizes swept as a word. Not even a Pentecostal.
And aside from the main factor of it being unconstitutional, Sanders' reasoning is just flawed. I mean, nothing Vought said was hateful, discriminant, or in violation of anybody's rights.
This is partially a straw man. Senator Sanders never said that Vought's statements violated anybody's rights.
The statement made by Mr. Vought is indefensible, it is hateful, it is Islamophobic, and it is an insult to over 1 billion Muslims throughout the world.
Statements like these are protected by the First Amendment, and Senator Sanders never made any case to the contrary.
And it's especially not Islamophobic. I mean, it's like me looking at a serial killer who killed 30 people, 15 of which were women, and said that that serial killer was a sexist because he killed 15 women. You'd be neglecting the other half, which were men. Let's rephrase this. Mr. Vought, do you think that blacks who have not accepted Christ stand condemned? Well, I mean, anyone who hasn't accepted Christ stands condemned, regardless of race. You racist!
That's racist! You're racist!
I stand by this portion of the video, apart from the horrible Bernie Sanders impression. I only wish that I had more clearly explained that Muslims were not the only ones who stood condemned, just like women were not the only ones killed by the serial killer. That way, the analogy would have been clear. Apparently, you weren't going for clarity. Or I wasn't going for clarity. I've switched between the first and third person so many times, I'm beginning to have an existential crisis. I'm gonna need to take a minute to reground myself in reality. Stay tuned, don't go anywhere. Now you probably need a break from all this nonsense too. Get up and stretch, repent of your sins, do whatever you need to do. I'll be back soon. Hopefully.
If you've been following my channel for a little bit, you probably noticed that I've been gone for a little bit. There's really no good reason for this, other than the fact that I spend a lot of time writing video scripts, and when the time comes to shoot them, I'm usually pretty busy with school. To those of you that are interested in my content, I'm sorry to keep you waiting. However, my guess is that I'll probably never be uploading videos on a consistent basis. I will try to crank some more out in the next few months, though. Just don't count on it.
And we're back. To recap what we've covered so far, I poorly explained an analogy that didn't even apply to the actual scenario. I called Bernie Sanders an SJW for no really good reason. My main point fell apart because I misunderstood what a religious litmus test is, and I partially strawmanned Senator Sanders' assessment of Vought's statements. We're not quite done yet, so let's continue to facts and logic this kid.
Not to mention, this is a central Christian claim here. It's not something new that we just invented because we don't like Muslims. It's something that we've always said. The only way to heaven, the only way to eternal life and salvation is Jesus. Why is Bernie acting so surprised at a central Christian claim? And funnily enough, Muslims make the same claim to an even higher extent. Every religion claims it is the only way, and yet you're highlighting Christianity as bigoted because they say that Muslims stand condemned.
Again, I stand by this claim as well. The only problem is I didn't do any work to substantiate it. It would have been very easy to cite passages from the Bible and from Islamic sources that talk about the issue of condemnation, but apparently I couldn't be bothered. I'll just mention a few in passing. For the Bible, I recommend you check out John chapter 3 verse 16 through 18, as well as John chapter 14 verse 6, and Romans 8 verse 1. Now, for the Quran, I recommend you check out chapter 3 verse 85, chapter 4 verse 136, and chapter 48 verse 13. There are a lot more verses and passages that can speak to that subject, but those are just a few that you can check out. I'm doing the work that this kid should have done.
But we shouldn't be as surprised, because the left always loves to cry, BIGOT!
Islamophobe!
Oh, sorry, Oscar.
Jeez. Well, congrats. You finished off the eardrums of the few unfortunate souls to watch this video, and you've awoken your poor little animal to make a largely irrelevant and flawed point. His mistake here is that he suggested that expectations for Senator Sanders should be set based on the stereotypes of the group of which he's a member, rather than suggesting that we should deal with Senator Sanders as an individual. Yes, the left is stereotyped as loving to shout buzzwords rather than have an intellectual conversation. And yes, there's a lot of truth to that stereotype, as there is with all stereotypes. But Bernie Sanders is his own man, and though he's a member of the left, we should be slow to judge him and set expectations for him based solely off of the fact that he is a member of the left, because the left is a very large and diverse group. There's a wide range of views and behaviors that can be seen on the left, just as with the right. This isn't to say that we don't assume anything about Senator Sanders based on him leaning left on the political spectrum. but this is just to say that we should handle politicians and people in general on a case-by-case basis. And the last thing that we should do is judge them or set our expectations for them based off of the negative tendencies of the very widespread group to which they claim membership. A similar issue will come up later in the video, so keep your ears wide open, but not too wide open, because then they might not be functioning by the end of the video, given the volume at which this kid is talking.
Bernie exposes himself as a postmodernist in this situation. He says, well, there are more than just Christians in America.
So I understand that Christianity is the majority religion, but there are other people who have different religions in this country and around the world.
What does that have to do with anything? What does the amount of Christians in a population have to do with truth? There's lots of different people of lots of different faiths, so... I mean, we don't want to be rude in claiming that ours is the right one, because they could all be right, you know?
If you don't know what Benny here is talking about, neither do I for the most part. But specifically if you're confused as to what he means by postmodernist, don't bother looking any further in the video for answers, because he never clearly defines postmodernism, which would be nice. We all know you're very smart, Benny, and we all know you like to use deoxyribonucleic terminology, but we wouldn't throw a fit if every now and then you could just clue us uneducated plebeians in as to what's going on inside that oh-so-brilliant mind of yours when you use words that are at least 4 syllables in length. What I was referring to is the view that there is no objective truth. Reality is different for every person, and what's true for one person might not be true for another. Facts are a subjective experience, and contrary to what Ben Shapiro may destroy you with, facts do care about your feelings, because if you want, facts can be shaped around them. That's what I meant, and it took me nearly 2 years to get it all out. 2 years. That's longer than my upload gap. Think about that.
Postmodernism is dangerous, and this guy with the fantabulous hair, who has these millennials bowing before him, exposes himself as a postmodernist.
Fantabulous? Hang on, okay. It is a word. Uh-oh. Informal. You think your English teacher would let that fly? What's the deal with his hair anyways?
I am simultaneously completely bald, and I have more hair than anyone else running for president.
Regardless, I think you give Senator Sanders a bit too much credit here. You assume that his seemingly irrelevant response exposes his postmodernism, but it could actually be that it's just an irrelevant response. What does the amount of Christians in the world have to do with the truth of Christianity? Not much, unless you're a postmodernist who believes that truth is a social construct. So either Bernie Sanders is a postmodernist, or he brought up an issue entirely irrelevant to the topic at hand. And for no particular reason, I chose the former. I decided that Bernie Sanders was a postmodernist. It is possible, however, that he didn't totally grasp what he was dealing with and brought up something that he thought was relevant, but actually wasn't. I'm not saying that he definitely isn't a postmodernist. I'm saying my assumption was unwarranted.
I mean, this is an important issue, because if this is swept under the rug and renamed as Defense Against Bigotry, we may begin to further cherry-pick the Constitution. Shut up!
Sheesh. You good there? You alright? This is why you don't have any headphone-using viewers. You killed them all 7 videos into your channel. That's gotta be the most unnoble death. Watching political videos. From a thick-rimmed hipster glasses wearing wannabe right-wing commentator 14-year-old with a strange obsession with the hair of a US senator in his 70s.
We may further cherry-pick the Constitution, like the Second Amendment and the First Amendment. It makes me wonder if religious people will ever be able to run for office.
The prediction that Vought scenario will lead to scenarios like it in the future is a hasty one. For the most part, it's based on the assumption that Senator Sanders' vote was unconstitutional, which I addressed previously. I took Senator Sanders' vote as denying Vought's eligibility for office, and therefore concluded that in the future Christians might not be eligible for public office. But even if my assumption was correct, it doesn't necessarily mean that more situations like this will happen in the future. I understand that predictions that aren't of divine origin aren't going to follow with absolute certainty, but I based my case off of one specific example and gave no evidence to support the idea that this one example was on a large enough scale to lead to more situations like it.
It makes me wonder if religious people will ever be able to run for office, especially Christians. I mean, it seems like Christians are being singled out. Would Bernie Sanders ever say no to a Muslim in office? I mean, it seems unlikely, because the left loves Islam, and God forbid they become bigoted themselves and say no.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, this is not funny. It was a genuine cough, but it was just genuinely unfunny to include that in the video. This is a bit of a repeat of the previous problem, treating Senator Sanders and the left as if they were the same entity. I provided no evidence for assuming that Senator Sanders aligned himself with the tendency of the left to be partial towards Islam. I just assumed that because he was on the left, he checked the box for that tendency. That's too easy. Anyone can talk politics when they only bring up stereotypes and not individual views.
Funnily enough, there's actually an online petition.
When is someone going to tell this kid that he doesn't have a beard and he's not an intellectual, so he has no right to be striking this pose? This must be like the third time I did that in a video. Actually, I think I still do that now. Yeesh.
There's actually an online petition with 50,000 people who've signed it, asking Bernie Sanders to apologize. Go sign it if you want. If you don't want to, that's fine. But we need to recognize what's actually happening here. Food for thought.
Well, that food for thought was very undercooked and seasoned with very poor humor. I'm surprised that out of all of my videos, this one got very little backlash. I suppose that there's a lesson that can be learned from all of this. Aside from the fact that I was wrong. Very wrong. I think it's worth noting that one shouldn't be afraid to be wrong. Sometimes the first step towards victory is to admit defeat. When it comes to ideas, worldviews, and discussion, our primary goal should not be winning the argument. Yes, we should seek to be persuasive and firm in our own position, but our goal should not be to bring other people closer to our line of reasoning, but to bring everyone involved, ourselves included, closer to the truth. Our firmness and confidence in our position shouldn't turn into closed-mindedness, but we should be prepared to follow the truth wherever it leads, even if it leads us against our previously held views. To step onto the right side of truth, even if it means losing an argument or admitting you're wrong, is the ultimate victory in the battle of ideas. Food for thought.